Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. And I'm Siobhan Hannan. I'm presenting here with my colleague Rachel. We're both presenting from Naarm, Melbourne. I'm on Wurundjeri country, and I think Rachel is in Bunurong country.
Yeah.
Um, but we actually teach people all over Australia because a lot of our teaching is done as online self-paced version. So I thought it would be a really good idea to give a little bit of framing to this because I don't think there are other people who've been presenting today who were involved in early childhood education. And I don't think anyone else is involved in block model delivery. And so those things actually have a very big impact on the context for our work. Our units, we are working in a graduate diploma in early childhood education. So we're training preschool teachers, kindergarten teachers. Um, but the majority of our students are overseas students who've come to Australia specifically to do this course, and they are doing it in block model, which means that they do one subject at a time for 4 weeks at a time. So the units that we're touching on today include our STEM unit, our arts and languages unit, and our social justice unit. So they do each of those for 4 weeks. Um, now, because we're involved in early childhood education, we do have already a very strong commitment to embodied learning and to innovative pedagogy. We are constantly confronted with the way that the world thinks that preschool teaching is just like small doses of school teaching. And so, really, the first thing we have to do, and other people have spoken about this as well, we're really working, like other people today have spoken about the problem of people seeing what you do as not real teaching. And in a lot of online teaching, that was something that Chuck Hodges said was, that doing online teaching is often seen as not real teaching. But preschool teaching is often seen as not real teaching too, because it doesn't easily fit people's image of the teacher, which is basically an image of a lecturer who has knowledge that they transmit to people by speaking it. And it doesn't matter how much we keep on saying, yeah, but constructivist, sociocultural, student, people developing their own understanding. Those ideas are really hard to get through to people. Um, we are trying to do it with students that have just arrived in the country, have maybe no previous um, background. They might have done a degree in IT or in maths or business or something. We're also often working with lecturers who are sessional, who've been employed just to deliver that block. And we've had huge throughput. So this time last year, we took in 1,500 students into our course in one hit. Luckily, things have settled down a bit now. Where this block I've got 245 students, but they are in um, four campuses, one Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and an online one as well. So it's a very complex environment. And within that, we're actually trying to touch on a lot of what you guys are trying to do in an entire course, but we're doing it in one block. So next slide, please, Rachel. Just as a bit of a taster of some of the sorts of things we do, in one of our units, which we would consider our STEM unit, but we fundamentally make it be about connecting to country and postmodern kind of ideas of actually listening to country and engaging with Indigenous knowledges. So what we ask the students to do as one of their assessment tasks is to read a reading, which is really quite a challenging reading that's got all these kind of postmodern ideas in it. But then we give them quite a simple task, which is just to go out on country, to go to the local park and go for a walk. So we ask them to preload their heads with the complex ideas, but to then go and do the simple thing of actually walking on country and noticing what it's like to be there, and then to report back on their experience of that, so that the real learning is in the reflection on the experience. And that's what we're trying to capture. It's not super resilient in its current form to forms of cheating. Although we do things like ask them to create a piece of ephemeral art, for example, which does actually situate the experience much more strongly in the time and place at which that they've documented. Another example is in our arts and languages unit, where very much what we're trying to do here is to ask the students to shift their image of themselves from being an expert to being a learner and being an artist, and experience being the artist as the learner themselves before they situate themselves as being the transmitter of technique to children, which we hope they will never get to. But we're trying to shake them out of that vision of what it means to be a teacher. So in this task, what we're asking them to do is it's about materiality. We're asking them to actually choose a material so that, again, they do a difficult reading about materiality as a concept, and then they're asked to choose one material and to explore that material without preconceptions. So the materials are things like paper and clay. Um, and we were finding that that was, with the arrival of Gen AI, that one was really quickly falling to being untrustworthy. And so we now actually ask the students to do their exploration live on camera and then to report back on it. So we have students all over Australia simultaneously on camera, each exploring the material in their own space. And then afterwards, we asked them to produce their documentation based on that, so that we actually saw them doing it and we could converse with them at the time while they were doing it, and we could check that they'd actually read the reading before they started. So that was the kind of stuff that we were doing, and we're very much involved in. It's a real kind of just-in-time delivery because with so many students and so much pressure, we just were constantly changing how we were doing things and trying to be really responsive and finding a better way to assess. But then we got to the point where the university said, okay, we are going to do a root and branch refresh of all our assessment so that our assessments are secure. And at this point, and this is where Eugenia and Rachel have, joined the team and have come in, and and they've looked at what we've done up to that point and said, okay, at this point, we need to move beyond tweaking assessments to actually having a bit more of a framework for what we're trying to do, and where we're really thinking about what are we trying to achieve here. So we're going beyond the question of, is this the student's own work, to, did the students learn what we needed them to learn? How can we tell if they learned what we needed them to learn? And did we give them an opportunity to learn what we needed them to learn? And this has led us to thinking that what we really need to do is redesign the whole task, redesign the framing of the way it's integrated into the unit, so that experience in the unit is much more of a journey through the learning, with the assessment not as an add-on but really integrated into the experience. So that's the piece of research that Eugenia and Rachel have now set up, framed around the social justice unit. And Rachel, take it away.
Thank you, Siobhan. I will take over from here. So I'd like to bring those design principles to life through our example 6003, one of the fully online early childhood teacher education unit, and to show how we intentionally designed opportunities for students to think, reason, and participate as beginning teachers in an online environment. So when we began reviewing this unit, we realized that our challenge wasn't simply that students were learning online. Many of our students were already working in the sector, but they often find it difficult to explain why they made particular decisions, or connect those decisions back to educational theory. So we were also working within an intensive 4-week block model, as Siobhan mentioned, where students were balancing full-time work, family responsibilities, and study. So that naturally limited opportunities for dialogue and reflection. So instead of asking, how can we fit more content into 4 weeks, we asked a different question. How can we help students connect theory, practice, and professional judgment in ways that feel authentic? So we simplified the curriculum, connected learning to authentic workplace contexts, scaffolded learning towards professional judgment. So rather than viewing embodied learning as something that only happens in a physical classroom, we wanted students to experience what it actually feels like to think and respond as beginning teachers. So one important design decision was to stop thinking about assessment as three separate tasks. So instead, we designed a one connected learning journey. So assessment one introduced key theoretical ideas through a children's pitchable critique. And then assessment two asked students to apply those ideas in authentic professional situations by doing simulated parent-teacher interview. Assessment three then asked them to reflect on and extend and justify their professional practice during the parent-teacher interview. So rather than repeatedly testing knowledge, each assessment intentionally built on the previous one. So we want students gradually moved from theory awareness to theory application, and then finally to reflective praxis. So we hoped this would support students not only to know the theory, but to begin reasoning like early childhood teachers. So assessment two became one of the strongest examples of embodied learning within the unit. So students worked with authentic family scenarios that reflected real issues encountered in early childhood settings, such as inclusion, cultural diversity, social economic disadvantage, and partnerships with families. So, working collaboratively, they designed learning experiences before participating in a simulated parent-teacher conversation. So, what made this different was that students couldn't simply present a finished product. They needed to explain their decisions, justify their pedagogical reasoning, and respond to questions from the lecturer. So the assessment shifted from asking, what have you written, to asking, can you explain your professional thinking? So that dialogue made students' reasoning visible. So assessment three then built directly on this experience. So students reflected on feedback from assessment two before extending their work into practical family resources that could genuinely support children and families within their own workplace contexts. What I particularly like about this assessment is that it shifted students' mindset. Rather than asking, what do I need to submit? They increasingly asked, would I actually use this resource with a family in a workplace situation? So that subtle shift from completing an assessment into creating something meaningful was really significant. So students then discussed these resources through another professional conversation where they again needed to explain how theory informed their decisions and how they would adapt them for different contexts. So assessment continued to function as a learning experience rather than simply an endpoint. So I'd like now to show some examples of the assessment three, the family toolkits our students created in response to different children's strengths, interests, and family contexts. So the first example is a shared discovery soundbox. So the box contains everyday and some natural objects that children and family members can explore together through sound, touch, and conversation. So it was designed to support a child with additional needs, with some sensory exploration, shared attention, and communication between the child and the family. The second example uses hand-painted stones and illustrated cards featuring ideas such as family members, things around us, emotions. So the student designed these as flexible storytelling prompts. A child could select a stone or card, name what they see, create a story, or use the images to communicate their feelings and experiences. So this supports the emotional literacy, vocabulary development, and family storytelling. And the third example is a planet matching activity. So children match pictures of planets with the written names. So this was developed around a child's interest in the solar systems, while also extending early literacy, visual recognition, and vocabulary. So it shows how a child's existing interest can become the standing point for broader learning. And the next example was designed for a family who had recently migrated from China and was still developing confidence in English. So the student created a series of bilingual and highly visual toolkits that included family activities, accessible online resources, and cue cards that could be used both at home and in early childhood settings. So this is just one of them. So the intention was not to position the family's language as a problem, but to create practical bridges between home language, English, and the child's learning experiences. The final example is a roll and tell story dice toolkit. So the children roll the dice and use the characters, settings, or objects shown to construct a story. So family members can join in, ask questions, or add ideas. So this supports imagination, oral language, communication, and shared family participation. Throughout the assessment, students could create those resources either by hand or use generative AI to support aspects of the design. So we did not treat AI use itself as the central issue. What mattered was whether the resource was thoughtful, context responsive, and genuinely practical. And during the live professional conversation, students had to explain why they selected the resource, how it responded to the child and the family, and how it would actually be used in practice. So even where AI assisted with an image or template, students still had to demonstrate the professional judgment behind the final decision. So looking back, I don't think the biggest challenge was redesigning the assessments themselves. The biggest change was redesigning opportunities for students to make their professional thinking visible. Through dialogue, students articulated their reasoning. Through authentic scenarios, they responded to uncertainty. Through reflection, they reconsidered and refined their decisions. These are all aspects of professional judgment that are often difficult to capture through traditional written assessments alone. So for us, this is where embodied learning became visible, even within a fully online environment. So our experience suggests that embodied learning doesn't depend on students sharing the same physical space. Instead, it depends on intentionally designing opportunities for students to participate in authentic and professional practice. When assessment mirrors the work of teachers, dialogue becomes part of the learning, and the professional judgment is made visible. Assessment becomes more than a way of measuring learning, it becomes a part of the learning itself. I would just quickly share some positive feedback from our teaching team before handing back to Siobhan, who will conclude by reflecting on the broader implications of this work across the program. So here are some feedback from our teaching team about the positive feedback they received from students and how the students mentioned that relate to their future teaching practices, and how our lecturers really enjoyed this unit and teaching. And you can see our students, they're not only in Melbourne, we also have many from different parts of Australia. And how the work help them, not just academic learning, but also their life experience, some observation, and practices in our setting. So the lecturer were also very impressed. We have lecturers been teaching the unit for many times, and they like how the family partnership contents, how students can put that into real practice. And they realized that they enjoyed assessment more than they thought they would. and how students could really begin to link the theory into practice. Thank you so much. I'll hand it back to Dr. Siobhan.
Um, yeah, so what we've been trying to do here is to really, go back to first principles and think about, well, how do we create an approach to the course design, the unit design, where the our approach to assessment is really contributing to our teaching and is yielding the results we want, but not as an add-on, but as something that's fully integrated into how we think of the unit. Um, it's particularly it's interesting for us because we our teaching of our students are not going to be online teaching their 3 and 4-year-olds. They will be going out and doing real life teaching in the workplace physically. And so it's quite a different sort of relationship to what some people are doing, where in online teaching you're also in some ways modeling things that the teachers might then use with their students in primary and secondary school. But um, the our overall task is very similar to the one that a lot of you have talked about, which is that you really, in teacher education, you're really trying to build the teacher's image of what it is to be a teacher and what it is to be a learner. And we are training people to work in a play-based context where what they have to do is set up opportunities for children to play and build their own learning. And so shaking them out of their assumptions is really fundamental, but also showing them, giving them that belief and the work, the sort of work that Eugenia and Rachel have been doing here, I think, you know, is part of the kind of practical experience that builds belief that I can do this, which we heard about in relation to, to maths earlier, because they get an experience of doing it. What we've been finding, I think, as well over time, um, as we do this kind of work, is that when we hit on the right kind of task and we think things through deeply enough, that the difference between the experience of in-person teaching and online teaching starts to evaporate. It doesn't matter so much anymore whether the students are in the room or not. The main thing that happens for us, which is a bit frustrating, is that the in-person students can be guaranteed to be actually present and more or less paying attention for 9 hours a week, and the online students, it's a bit harder to actually get their attention for that much time. But for the ones who do the reading, do the time, do the thinking, I think it's our now experiences that we would no longer say that the experience of being in person is substantially different or superior to doing it through the online delivery. So, open for
Thank
questions.
you.
Thank you so much, Siobhan and Rachel and Eugenia, of course, who isn't able to be here today. I always love seeing that redesign process, the thinking behind it and what it looks like in other contexts, because we get so bogged down in our own, don't we, that it's just inspiring to see what others are doing. I shall open the floor for questions. And you all know I've got a bucket load on this day. Can I start with a pragmatic one? And it was listed on the previous slide. How do you facilitate this in 4 weeks? 3 pieces of assessment. We have much longer in ours. We have trimesters and we only have 2 pieces of assessment. I just can't imagine what it must be like to do 3 pieces in 4 weeks.
Well, it's intense.
Yeah.
It is designed so that this is meant to be a full-time activity for the student for 4 weeks. They're not doing multiple subjects. They're only doing this one. And that is according to the, the research that's been done about the block model. That's what appeals and that's what they like about it. That they can just fully focus on the one thing.
Mm.
Um, there is an option to go part-time so students can spread out their engagement over a longer period of time. But mostly the answer is it's very intense learning and it's very intense teaching. Um,
Well, I was just
and
thinking, even in terms of getting the marking done, because am I correct in that assignments 2 and 3 are live, like a Viva type
Yeah.
situation? Yes.
For
And
us, it is live. So we let lecturers to mark as they do interview. So
yes.
they don't have to write comprehensive written feedback. They can just provide oral feedback. That will save lots of marking time.
Yeah, and so students just have to book a Viva time slot in a specific week. And I assume you have to have lots of markers to facilitate that. Sorry, I'm asking really boring practical questions, but this is where my head went to.
each lecturer teaches and marks their own class.
Hmm.
And the maximum number of students in a class is 35.
Oh, okay, that's manageable then.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's more like a seminar, really, then, but it's not done. So if like when we've got, 250, 45 students across the unit, that's with 7 lecturers each delivering themselves. So yeah, so that is more manageable. I mean, we're supposed to do 2 blocks, so I would have 70 students in any given moment. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Um, On the other hand, all employed as teaching focused academics, so we're not actually, really that teaching is what we do.
Yes.
And so really the assessment is a very big part of
Mhm.
but that's also I think one of the reasons why in, really thinking this through, um, and I hope that Eugenia will agree that I'm not putting words into her mouth, but that making sure that it's a formative assessment and that the experience of doing the assessment is in itself valuable. It's not a later extra.
Mhm.
That's more important because of the fact that the experience of doing the assessment takes up a lot of time and is a very dominant part of the experience of doing the unit and teaching the unit. So if you have to make sure that the thing that you're doing is actually worth doing.
It reminded me of what Pip shared before too about the assessment being very much woven throughout their unit of learning, and that was so inextricably entwined that it didn't sit as something separate.
Yeah, yeah,
I just
absolutely.
think it's intuitively and beautifully designed, like this page in particular that you've got on screen. Thanks for showing that again, Rachel. The way that you've aligned it also with the taxonomy, it's beautiful. Well done.
Yeah, so it comes out, it looks kind of simple when you finally, as is often the case, like when you write a beautiful song, it can sound very simple when it's finished, but the amount of permutations and the complexity that you went through in order to get to the point of simplicity is quite a lot. So, and I think it's very important that this is such a plausibly work related thing to be doing. There's because it means that the students and the sessional lecturers can immediately see what the point is of doing this. You don't have to persuade them that it's a worthwhile thing to do. They can see why you need to know how to do this. And so the effort that then goes into supporting it to happen and assessing how it's been done through the thinking that's been done about how to do it, it, is immediately valued by them. That's true to say, Rachel?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pip's got a question?
Thank you. It was really, really interesting. And at a different end of the sort of spectrum to me, dealing with the early childhood education, I've always thought that is a really tricky area. As someone who's not in that area, I was going to ask a little bit about how the block with the block model And this embedded assessment, which you can see is really important and really well devised. How does the block learning work, in your opinion, across the different, yeah. Do you think it's more effective than if they had, say, three subjects or four subjects running concurrently?
Um, I think that might be a bit outside the scope of what I've been thinking about.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
really
sorry.
been. I was sort of in. I started working at VU as block model was being instituted, and they're committed to it, and they reckon that students love it, and so those are the terms on which we're employed. So we put our energy into working out how to make it work rather than whether it's the best idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
but
mean,
I did want to actually one thing I wanted to mention. You I think said that uh, think that people should see the arts as being the foundation of everything.
mm,
And I think we do in our course,
yeah,
and in early childhood teaching, we do see
yeah,
the arts as being the foundation of everything.
we
And I
do.
think that's one of the things that actually helps us to be creative in our approach to embodied learning and to assessment because we see integrating the arts into the way students are taught and assessed,
Mm,
even if the topic is not apparently an artistic one, but like another task that involved in with, for example, is when we ask them to learn about language acquisition, they go off and research language acquisition in their own first language. But the expression of that is that they have to work as a group to turn it into a piece of creative art.
lovely. Yeah.
So we're always triangulating our embodied experience through bringing in the creative arts as a tool for understanding and expressing ideas.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, that sounds very sensible.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, it's time.